But when I was 5, I was taken off the medications and I continued to thrive. So it seemed that my experience with seizures was a thing of the past. Stuff changed when I was 14 years old. When seemingly out of the blue, I developed these episodes where first I felt this sensation of deja vu, and then I felt like this nervousness in my stomach, and then this rising heat that ascended that made me swallow a lot, smack my lips, and then left me feeling really empty and confused. When I described these episodes to my parents, they did what any parent would do. They took me to the doctor. I remember sitting in the pediatrician's office and kind of watching this look of skepticism cross his face as I described what I now know were complex partial seizures. Probably because I was focusing on this weird feeling in my belly, he did this thorough abdominal exam and did a rectal exam with my dad in the room. And gave us a prescription for Maalox and told me to go home. You can imagine that anything that led to a 14-year-old girl getting a rectal exam in front of her father would be quickly swept under the carpet. So even though I continued to have seizures, sometimes up to 10 or 12 times a day at certain times during the month, I didn't talk about them again. When I was 18, I gave blood at our local high school blood drive. And I was walking down the hall at the end of the day behind my friends when suddenly I felt the familiar aura begin. Except this time, it didn't decrescendo as it usually did. It kept going until I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk. I think I tried to say, help me, but I don't know. Everything went black. That was the first of many times that I woke up in the bed of an ambulance with a kind EMT looking over me, explaining what had happened. The subsequent hospitalization, MRI, EEGs, and tests led to my diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy. In the almost 20 years that have ensued since my diagnosis, I've had a roller coaster of medication trials, medication failures, tolerable side effects, intolerable side effects. And then there was a period in 2003 when I was a pediatric resident when I had worsening seizure frequency, worsening medication intolerance, and that's when I had a temporal lobectomy. After my temporal lobectomy, I had 5 blissful months where I was seizure-free. I started to withdraw the medications and I was feeling great. And then one day, driving home from the hospital after a long day as a resident, I felt the familiar aura come back. In disbelief, I had the wherewithal to pull over just before I succumbed to another generalized seizure. I knew that epilepsy was back, and I knew that it was here to stay. I learned the next day that I was pregnant with our son Alex. So it turns out the hormones of pregnancy for me create a very interesting ride. During all 3 of our pregnancies, I've had good memories of feeling the baby kick and choosing the color of the nursery and choosing the baby's name. And those are pockmarked by memories of trips to the ER, worsening medications, worsening seizures, and more trips in the ambulance. I remember when I was pregnant with Callie, who's our last. In the middle of the night, I was struggling to come to consciousness after another generalized seizure. My husband was curled up next to me, and as he realized I was trying to come to, he whispered, "I don't even call 911 anymore. I just hold on tight, watch the clock, and hope that the seizure goes away." So now, as I stand in front of you on my current cocktail of Tegretol and Keppra, I'm at a crossroads that I think a lot of people with epilepsy face. I have a choice to continue the medications that make me feel like I've been hit with a Mack truck every afternoon and have less seizures, or I can back off on some of the medications and accept that I will live with more seizures, more uncertainty, more fear. The choices are not ideal. It's time we found a cure. Eileen told us that you guys might appreciate knowing what it's like to live with epilepsy, so this is my cheesy attempt at portraying what it's like to live with epilepsy every day. Living with epilepsy means that I know the distinct scent of EEG glue as well as I know the scent of my children. Living with epilepsy means that I've learned how to fall asleep in MRI machines, I've learned to wait patiently in doctor's offices, and I've learned to perform neurologic tests without prompting. Living with epilepsy means that I must not be the epileptic patient, but I'd rather be the patient with epilepsy. I cannot let seizures own me. Living with epilepsy means that even some of the most significant days of my life have been accompanied by seizures, like the day I delivered my son, our 10th anniversary, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving. Living with epilepsy means that when the familiar sensations of a partial seizure appear, I find myself searching for a place to sit, away from view, in case the simple seizure leads to something more. Living with epilepsy means hiding my illness under a well-designed shroud afraid that if others know that I have seizures, they'll lose their faith and trust in me. Living with epilepsy means that after every night of interrupted sleep, I worry that my fatigue will wake the monster within and the seizures will come again. Living with epilepsy means that I examine my tongue every morning for the characteristic bite mark that is my sign of a nocturnal seizure. Living with epilepsy means I overanalyze every unusual feeling and spend time wondering if my fleeting indigestion, dizziness, or headache actually might be a new type of aura. Living with epilepsy means I can list almost every anti-seizure medication and side effect profile. I've tried them all. Living with epilepsy means I'll consent to tests that turn off part of my brain, remain tethered to a wall for up to a week, and consent for removal of my temporal lobe in hopes for the cure that still eludes me. Living with epilepsy means that I can feel compelled to join others like me and look down the long, dark road that I pray may ultimately lead to a cure.